Since so much of the focus of the bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and American President Donald Trump has been on tariffs, I want to put this whole debate about trade tariffs into perspective. And I'll take you through some charts which really give you a sense of what's at play. We'll first look at the tariffs, the weighted mean tariffs that India imposes on products imported from the United States and what the US imposes on products imported from India. So what you see in the green line above are the average tariffs that India puts on products brought in from the US, and the blue line is the line which indicates the tariffs that America applies on products imported from India. So American tariffs have been relatively low all through. They're currently at about 3%. India's average weighted tariffs before the budget stood at about 9.5. Post the budget, this would come down to 8.5, but stood at 9.5. So there's a big gap of about 6% on the average weighted tariffs that India applies on products which we import from the United States and the tariffs that the US implies on products which are imported from India, it is this gap of 6.5% that is the cause of irritation for Donald Trump, and he wants to change it. He says, "Jitna aap lagaoge, utna main lagaunga." You know, there are some research studies that say of all the countries, India could potentially be the most impacted if these reciprocal tariffs that Donald Trump spoke about in that press conference yesterday afternoon are implemented. Now, we know for a fact that the new US Commerce Secretary and our Commerce and Industry Minister, Piyush Goyal, will very quickly get into talks. Robert Lutnick, we're waiting for him to be ratified by the US Senate. But till then, this is where things stand. So if there is no change between now and the 2nd of April, and if Trump does push through on his threat to implement tariffs in the way that he's announced, potentially India could face tariffs up to 29%. Brazil could come in second at 28%, EU at 25%, the UK at 24%, Mexico at 23%, Canada at 19%, Korea at 13%, Taiwan at 12%, Singapore at 9%. So India could potentially, which is why when he sees charts like this, Donald Trump concludes that India is the tariff king or is abusing tariffs. And therefore, if nothing changes between now and April, India could have the maximum impact of these reciprocal trade tariffs. I'll try and show this in a comparison to give you a sense of what really to expect, at least on the basis of the way trade data stands at the moment. And that's the third chart coming up on your screen right now. The tariffs that we apply versus tariffs that the United States applies. So here is our trade deficit. This again is a big cause of concern for Donald Trump. But remember, relative to, say, a country like China, China has a $295 billion trade surplus with the US, which means they export $295 billion worth more than they import. The euro area, again, taken together, a big trade abuser from Trump's lens. So is Mexico and Vietnam. India is relatively less at number 9. You know, then there's Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Canada. India has a $45.7 billion surplus. This is what Donald Trump is seeking to extract. And Prime Minister Modi's promise is that we could buy more energy, oil from you. We could potentially also buy more defense purchases from you, and if that happens, that $45 billion surplus could go. Basically, what Trump is trying to play at is to get India to buy more oil and more defense purchases, because that's the fastest way of dealing with this. I'll take you through some categories of tariffs. For example, India's average tariff on all products is about 9.5 on US products, whereas the US tariff on Indian products is 3. So this is the 6.5% gap we spoke about. Let's now go through some products where the gaps are bigger. For example, on dairy products. And this is logical from India's perspective because there are lots of small dairy farmers. Minister Piyush Goyal, Prime Minister Modi, Nirmala Sitharaman, they need to take care of our small dairy farmers. Therefore, we impose high tariffs on products imported from the US. The US doesn't like that. On fruits and vegetables, India's tariffs are 132. The US too has high tariffs, 120. India, in fact, pushing for the ability to export more, say, mangoes to the US. That, again, has been a bone of contention. This is cereals and food preparations. India's tariff 193%, America's 150. Here again, a gap between the tariffs imposed by India versus the tariffs imposed by the United States. I'll take you through a few more product categories, beverages and tobacco on your screen right now, where it's the same. India doesn't want too much imported from the US, neither does the US. On minerals and metals, though, a big differential. India's average tariff 187, America's about 40. So a gap here between the tariffs imposed by India on American products and what America charges. India has far fewer import duties on chemicals. American import duties are much higher. So it's not as if India is higher on all categories. In categories like transport equipment, for example, India's import tariffs on US products only 50% versus 125 imposed by the United States. So this is a broad sense of why Trump is angry. He's a deal maker, a businessman. He wants to change it and he says, okay, tum lagao, main lagao. Reciprocal tariffs. That's his new economic warfare brahmastra, which he threatens to unleash on countries like India. The irksome thing, of course, is that it happened at a time when the Indian Prime Minister was on DC. So a rather ill-timed press conference from an Indian lens. But from a Trumpian lens, that's the point he wishes to make. That's the message he wishes to send.